Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Frank McNally from Public Spend Forum. I want to welcome you to our webinar for today. It's right at 2 o'clock. Let's just give a moment for all of our participants to get into the room and begin to familiarize yourself with the Zoom webinar platform today, as if you need any time to acclimate yourself to a digital webinar service like this. This has pretty much been our life for the last 7 months. But if you're not familiar with Zoom, it is really easy to work. You can kind of hover your mouse on the Zoom screen and it'll pull up a little toolbar there where you can chat with us. We have one of my colleagues, Yanisa Perez de Leon, is going to be moderating the chat. So we welcome questions today. You can submit those questions through the chat or through the Q&A, which is also in that little toolbar down there. So either way you want to submit the question works for us. We'll be keeping an eye on that and would love to hear from you. So it's just a little bit past 2, and I do see we still have some participants trickling in. So I'm just going to wait another 30 seconds or so. And my options, whether to do that on mute or just tap dance my way through this dead air. We don't have any like theme music. That wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of let people know that we are live. But I see our participant count there ticking up a little slowly now, although it's nice to see people arriving. I think we can probably go ahead and get started. First and foremost, I want to thank the sponsor of this event today, Ivalua. Ivalua is a provider of leading procurement software for sourcing and procurement across the entire source-to-pay process. So it makes sense that they would be here with us today for this webinar on eProcurement, which, I mean, it really is the backbone of digital procurement and digital government. So I love Ivalua's tagline, all spend and all suppliers with no compromises. I think that's going to come through today as you see a little bit about their platform, and also a look at a few case studies where they have helped their clients in the public sector accomplish some really important work in e-procurement and digital governance. Well, Public Spend Forum, that we're putting on this webinar today. So we have to talk a little bit about what we do, of course. Public Spend Forum is a market intelligence and procurement innovation platform. We really see ourselves as an ecosystem for public sector markets across the globe. Our ultimate goal is to envision open government markets to account for and more efficiently spend $10 trillion in goods and services, which is about the number for global public sector spending in the year. We believe governments can and should have quick access to the commercial innovations that the companies in the private sector are providing. It's not just traditional companies; it's small and emerging startups and new entrants to the market that have high quality products and services that government can and should benefit from. So we help match government requirements with those types of suppliers and help them get efficient access to more relevant government opportunities and customers in a more efficient manner. We do that through our suite of tools and services, and that's really highlighted by GovShop. GovShop is our flagship market research platform. It is a supplier intelligence and opportunity matching ecosystem for the public sector. We know market research is a crucial part of the procurement process. It's one of those things where if you don't get it right in the beginning, it just messes things up all the way down the road through contract award and into performance. So we believe market research can be better, and we created GovShop to help make that better. So go check out govshop.com. Next time you're looking to do market research, or if you're a supplier looking for government opportunities, we've got those on there as well. But enough about us. We have a great panel today. Like I said earlier, my name is Frank McNally. I'm the Director of Learning and Content here at Public Spend Forum. And we are joined by three really thought leaders in this field, obviously. We've got Jared McAdoo from Ivalua, Jason Bush, Azul Partners, and How Good, who's got a long career in public procurement. We're happy to have you all today. I'm going to let you just introduce yourself briefly, starting with Jared, and then we'll go across the screen from there. So Jared.
Great. Thank you very much, Frank. It's a pleasure to be here talking with everyone today, and especially being on this panel. My name is Jared McAdoe. I'm a product marketing manager with Evalua. Prior to joining Evalua, I've had a lot of experience in the public sector as well. I've worked on the defense side, and I've had some experience in higher education as well at a large research university. So it really is a pleasure to be able to talk about some of our experiences, but also hear from the experiences of everyone on the panel and from those in the attendance today as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Jared. Jason.
Excellent. It's nice to be a part of the webinar. Thanks, everyone. My background comes mostly from private sector originally, but in the past 10 years, a lot more dovetailing private and public sector. I was at an early firm in the strategic sourcing space called Free Markets for 5 years, which is where I met my co-founder of Public Spend Forum, Raj Sharma, and more recently started Azul Partners, Spend Matters, and a bunch of other ventures in the procurement sector. So it's an honor to be here today, and hopefully I don't detract from the words of wisdom of everyone else. Hopefully I can keep up with what they have to say and their standards. Thank you.
Far too modest, Jason, and thank you for reminding us all of your co-founding of Public Spend Forum. We appreciate what you've done for us to date. And last but certainly not least, how good? How?
Hi, everybody. It's a privilege to be part of this today. I started out in procurement at NYU Langone Medical Center, healthcare in New York City. And that experience, I didn't realize how relevant it's going to be in today's world until we were confronted with the COVID crisis, and a lot of the lessons learned, ongoing lessons learned, became more and more relevant. Anyway, my background is over 30 years in public procurement and interacting with state and local and federal, because I was involved with airport and federal grants and so forth. And coincidentally, probably a relevance to today's discussion is I was involved in the first e-commerce effort in the state of California, partnering with San Diego County and Palm Springs in the first public entities to do electronic bidding online. So that was the beginning of kind of e-procurement, and it's evolved into what it is today.
Fantastic. Well, we can't wait to have your perspectives on a life of basically watching the digitization trends. And I'm glad you mentioned, COVID, because that's obviously on our minds and in our lives every day. But the opportunities that it may create, and I'm all about silver linings and finding that, in hard times. But what we are dealing with now has pushed a lot of agencies and a lot of organizations into a more digital environment. And so this is a really timely webinar and a really great opportunity for us to have this conversation when I'm sure many of you in the audience are actively looking for ways to improve your own digital health and your processes, and maybe that extends all the way to e-procurement. Jared, tell us a little bit before we kind of jump into our discussion section. Tell us more about the Evalua platform and what it's all about.
Yeah, thank you. I would love to do that. So I want to start just maybe a little bit about some of our fundamental tenets that we have here at Evalua, and then we'll discuss a little bit more specifically about some of our public sector solutions. So at Evalua, as we mentioned, we are a complete S2P platform, a source-to-pay platform, and we're really built on some fundamental tenets, like we mentioned in our tagline, all spend, all suppliers, and no compromises. And what that means for us, and it permeates our solutions, is we really look at the three fundamental pillars that we've designed our solution and our processes around. The first really is our rapid time to value. And within that, a couple of the points I'd like to highlight, which I think are going to be really apropos when we discuss some of the case studies later, is our ability to rapidly enable our suppliers. It is not unheard of for us to be able to quickly enable 98+% of our suppliers with our clients to get them contracting, to get them transacting, to get them registering, assessing risk quickly. So we're able to do those quickly, and we're also able to drive a quick user adoption as we look at to try to do all of our aspects of our solution to be intuitive on those. So those are two aspects I wanted to highlight of our pillars. The next is we're always looking to focus with our solutions to drive greater value. And with that is really about data quality. We have a single unified platform, so we're able to leverage all aspects of our data across the S2P platform with our solutions to make sure we're enabling better decision making, to make sure that we're driving greater value. And with that, we're able to handle all forms of spend, whether we're talking indirect spend, whether we're talking direct spend, capital spend. We're able to take all those within the solution to make sure that we're giving that complete platform. We're measuring the complete and total risk picture. We're leveraging all the information we can. And with that, we're also looking to drive collaboration, not only collaboration with our stakeholders, which is going to be a very important part. And it's a number of things that we definitely want to highlight later in the discussion, but collaboration with our suppliers. I think coming through the COVID, one thing that you see, I've been in supply chain and procurement for over 20 years now. There's always that sense of collaboration with suppliers, sometimes more than others. Sometimes they're transactional, but sometimes they really are partners. But what we see more with COVID coming out of there, as we've had constrained, we are looking more of a partnership. How do we innovate? How do we deal? How do we identify where some of the linkages are? So we're really proud of our solution on our ability to drive that collaboration as well. And last but not least, we look at two areas on this: is our ability to lower risk for our clients and deliver tailored best practices. So I've sort of mixed those two together because I think they go hand in hand. We lower risks for our clients because implementing a platform like Evalua, sometimes it can be a once in a generation opportunity where we actually get the funding and we get the organizations on board to make the type of transformation that we like to facilitate. So we want to make sure that we're delivering a low risk for being able to implement those items. That's why we have industry best practices. We have solutions like I'm going to talk about with our public sector solutions that are really pre-built to deal with the nuances of public sector. We don't ask our clients for that once in a generation, a transformation opportunity to pound a square peg in a round hole. So we offer pre-packaged best practice solutions. And we also offer a proven experience with large, complex organizations, whether it is within the public sector or whether it is in the private sector or various industries through the private sector. We have a proven track record to do that. But to just step back from there, I did want to highlight that I mentioned that we have prepackaged solutions. One of our most successful prepackaged solution is our public sector vertical within the items. And you can see on the screen here, this is our layout for our public sector solution. As you can see, we drive across from the supplier enablement through the actual invoicing, and layered on top of this here at the end and permeating all through, we have a strategy and analytics. Some of the best practices we have in our public sector solution, and some of the things that we want to highlight, is this solution isn't just an adoption of commercial practices. Again, I mentioned that we don't want to be the square peg in the round hole. This solution for the public sector has been purpose-built for our public sector customers. As an example, we have our public portal there on the far left side. Within our public portal, we have the ability to actually publish solicitations. So we can get suppliers to actually bid on those. We can actually register suppliers. They can come in the system. We can actually publish to the public. We can get the visibility on the type of awards that we're making. We can actually get visibility on the type of contracts we dish out there. So it really is life in a fishbowl almost for us. Is we want to go with a high level of transparency for our public sector customers, depending on what level they actually need to. Take that a step further, we also have offerings within our public portal is to deal with items like freedom of information requests. We can actually leverage the system to intake those type of requests and apply a workflow and apply a review process on top of those. So we can better corral those type of information requests, so we can make sure they're getting done in a reasonable amount of time, so we can turn this around. So we're always giving the perception and we're always giving the reality that we're responding to their public need. We also have the ability within that to apply that same workflow and those type of requests in the public sector to bid protests. So we can give that type of information out there if there ever is an issue, which we hope through this level of transparency, we can also minimize those. But wherever we do have those issues, we'd have the ability to submit those type of requests, utilize the platform and the workflow to make sure those are routed internally, they're tracked, their disposition in a reasonable amount of time. And I don't need to tell everyone on this. I'm sure they've heard the cliche, you can't measure it if you don't track it. So for a lot of these instances, we have that information, it's in there as well. If we take a step over to some of our other solutions, like our supplier management solutions. So we have the traditional supplier information management systems where we can register our suppliers. We can get them onboarded. We can help our clients design a key onboarding process that meets their needs. We can share within stakeholders. So that ability is in there. We also have the ability to assess risk and performance management part of this. But one item we have in here as well is our ability, especially with COVID, is to actually look deeper into the supply chain. Within our supplier management solution, we can now register subcontractors. We can link those subcontractors with our initial tier 1 suppliers and also assign them against projects or contracts. So when we find ourselves in a situation where we need to, like we saw with COVID, but more in general, if we have an issue, we can see where those suppliers are within our supply chain, look at the interdependencies we might have on the end tiers of suppliers to see where we might have a risk. Further, this also enables us, which is very important to us as a company, but also to our clients, is to start looking at our diversity spend. To be able to capture this information through our supplier information management and to be able to track that as part of the spend is great. But as we start looking on what our real impact is with our clients down through the supply chain, we now have the ability to make sure we capture that and look at our second tiers on that to see where we're spending. That's very important just from a general diversity standpoint, but it also becomes very important as we have specific contract goals. So being able to link those items and have that information really enables our ability for our clients to meet those needs and generate that reporting easily, quickly, and trustworthy. And last but not least, before I leave supplier management, one thing that we do like to talk about at Evalua is our ability to integrate with ERP systems and other systems that we have on this. So within the supplier, and I just saw it pop up. So yes, the slide isn't changing. This is our higher level and roadmap. So, but I would say, without boring you with 50 slides, if you want to reach out to us separately, we can discuss any of the details underneath all of these. So yeah, so we're talking to the higher level slide here. But going back, we have the ability to integrate with a number of systems to bring that information in. We could be the vendor master for various systems linked to ERP systems. So we can deal with those myriad of other systems that we have out there hanging out. When I touch on some of the other items, when I look at our solicitation and bid management, it has the type of items you would expect to see across a sourcing and solicitation platform. We can run the auctions, we can run the RFPs, we can run the RFQs. We also have what we termed as our solicitation decision center, where we can actually build smart rules into the evaluation of a sourcing decision. For example, if we wanted to carve out a certain portion of an RFX for diversity spend, we can actually load those scenarios as part of the solution, and we can make sure that we're getting award scenarios that would recommend that. So again, we're making the process more efficient, more transparent. We're able to apply these rules on these items. A couple of other things that that are important to a number of our public sector solutions. I'm going to jump over to procurement. Is one thing you see in the public sector that you sort of see differently in the private sector, at least from my opinion, because I've managed procurement groups in both, is the number of buyers in the public sector side just really outnumber what you see on the private sector. We can have instances, for example, when I talk to the city of New York, as we go through their implementation and as we continue to deal with them, they just don't have dozens of buyers. They have hundreds, thousands of buyers on these items as well, on these items. So the ability to be able to take these requirements in from these various buyers, and also the requisitions that go on top of this, is very important. So one thing we've done in our public sector solution is actually give the ability of everybody to use the solution, whether they're a requisitioner or not. They might be somebody in a warehouse who needs something. They can fill out a simple needs form that can be routed via our workflow and can tell the buyer saying, hey, I'm missing this. And that gives our buyer the opportunity to either coach them on something that might exist in a catalog, or they can make the smart decision, well, we need to go to sourcing on this, or we have something to support that. So again, part of our pillar for adoption on these items is to make sure that we have the right information available to individuals, and also we can really encourage the users to accept the solution and use that. And last but not least, I wanted to move over to hit on our strategy and analytics. This is one of our most powerful features because we have the ability, because we are built across one platform, is to always get all the data that comes in the system. We can retrieve on it, we can report on it. So if we want to track it, we can do it because we have the data elements. Out of the box, we have over 100 different reports, and it is very easy to create a new report. Within the system, you don't have to be a power user. You don't have to contract out to have a partner come in and do it. It's something that can be designed with an individual. Now, for me, that was always very important when I joined Evalua and I asked these type of questions, because I'm forever looking at spend data. I'm forever looking at performance metrics, cycle times, those type of things to make sure that I'm delivering the correct value, but I'm also delivering the correct customer experience to items across this. So it was very important for us to be able to get it. We don't have an information. If it's in the system, we can report on it. And if it's in the system, we can also enable it throughout the process. Do you want to see a risk when you're going through your sourcing process as you're picking a suppliers? The risk score is embedded right with the suppliers as you select them, as it can be on the procurement side. We can also look at performance scoring. So we really take the data seriously on this, and we want to enable every part of our decision process on that. Okay, I think I drained that slide, so maybe we'll move on to the next one. So Frank, if you wouldn't mind. So I just said a mouthful on this, and I'm sure you all believed how great we are because I said it, and we've known each other now for 20 minutes. But I just wanted to provide some additional information as well. So we've really put a lot of effort into our solution, and it's not only recognized by our clients because we retain over a 98% customer retention, but we've also been recognized, by the third-party experts who assess these items. So we're the only supplier that across Gartner and Forrester for the full S2P to rank as leaders on this. So we're very proud of that. We continue to put a lot of effort into our solution for our clients' benefit. And we think, this slide here really shows our ability to meet the needs and continue to demonstrate that. And it continues to challenge us to meet those needs. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, that we really rely a lot on the fact that we can deliver for our clients, and we have the experience to do so. So these are just a few of the logos we have out there across our various industries that we support on this. 300 of some of the most admired companies, and we are well represented in the public sector, and something that we're particularly proud of, that we continue to make inroads as a company on this at all levels. We have from the levels of states, then down to state agencies, then down to other entities in that. We now have customers not only in the United States and Canada. We've also branched out with some recent public sector wins in Europe and actually in the Middle East as well. So we continue to look at our solution and build what we consider to be the leading source-to-pay solution in the public sector.
Excellent. Thanks, Jared. There were two questions that came in. I'm not sure if you want to take them now or wait till the end, but they seem relevant sort of to some of the capabilities of your platform. So if you're up for it, I can read them out. Up to you. Any objection on that?
I'm sorry, Frank, I put you back on mute. Yes, I don't have any objections.
Okay, cool. So I think there's one question first about from Magda about the supplier management component. She's asking if it allows for the capture of international suppliers' biodata. sort of the reason for the question is because many solutions that are, I guess, developed here stateside don't facilitate the insertion of foreign country information like international business registration numbers, foreign country names, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you guys deal with international supplier data? In terms
Yeah,
of
Magda, the short answer on your question is yes. Although we have a base offering that we go into, our roots are as an international company. We started out in Europe and we have customers all over the world. So as part of the scoping process with our customers, we make sure that we have the right amount of data in that fields in there as part of the implementation process.
Excellent. Another international question. Public sector, I mean, this comes from us from South Africa. So public sector practitioners in South Africa don't necessarily want a system that exposes their irregular activities. How do you work around that? Or how do you work around those that want to, I guess, retain their own status quo? That's a great and interesting question. I look forward to hearing your answer.
Yeah, I would love to hear. I want you the definition of irregular activities because that sounds like a juicy discussion right there, then and there. But it really, I think it really comes down to how you implement these and the change management you have there is I love in talking to City of New York, because I just had the opportunity to talk to their CPO last week, and he tells some great stories about how a lot of controls were born out of the corruption and the mafia of the 1970s, to stop some of these. And really, he's taken the stance on his transformation as being life in a fishbowl. It doesn't necessarily zero in on everyone. It just exposes every aspect of every workflow, so you can see what's being done and those type of items. So it's really shining light on that. And it's a lot of what we offer, with our solution. Like I mentioned, if there's a data element in the system, we can expose it. We can see wherever items are at. We pride ourselves in being a solution that will grow with you. That if you implement us now and you get a new regulation or you get a new level of spend, you're not looking to replace us. It's something that can be configured and tweaked to meet the business need. So, as that grows for a business need, but even as the change management grows, that can be done as well. Especially deal with the change management side is, better might be better might be the enemy of good enough in some cases, and then you sort of iterate on some of those changes. But I wouldn't perceive to know all the juicy answers on those.
It's a good answer and a great point, by the way, that Alan makes on digitization and the process sort of optimization will make it more difficult, I guess, to conduct the regular activities. So that's a good thing, but obviously some friction, I guess, if you're in the public sector down in South Africa and trying to enact this type of evolution. So thanks, Alan, for that question. Sean has a quick question about the SMART evaluation and award module that you mentioned. Can you talk just a little bit more about what that SMART evaluation module does?
Sure. And Sean, I can tell you I won't do this justice. And if my partner Doug, who actually owns the solution, would hear me talk about it, he would probably smack me if we were in the office, because I won't do it justice. But we're really excited about the solution because it actually gives you the opportunity to build based on a rule set, and the rule set is configurable, or we have a set of out-of-the-box rules when you first buy this on how you want a solicitation awarded. It's a little easier to, straightforward for me if I explain a manufacturing case and I want to limit risk, and I want to do some lotting scenarios, and I want an in-depth of suppliers available, but I want to rank them based on their performance score within the system or their risk scoring within the system. So that's all criteria that I can actually build into the recommended award scenarios. So if I want to make sure that I have a lotting strategy which gets me at least 3 suppliers, I want 40% to go to the least risky supplier, and I want to go from there on another 2 or 3 suppliers, I can build in those rules So instead of doing a long analysis at the end to, harmonize all these scores, I build the rules up front and it'll tell me that information as well. You can do that with diversity. You can do that with levels of diversity as well. If you have an instance where I know on this RFX, I want to make sure that I'm awarding this much spend to a diverse business or small business or a woman-owned business, you can actually set those rules in it as well. And based on the rules in the evaluation of the value, the system will make recommendations, recommended award scenarios for that. So again, we have out-of-the-box scenarios where rules are pre-built, or if a client would like additional rules, that's always part of the implementation where we can pre-build those rules and enable the clients moving forward if they want to add new rules. So again, please don't tell the rest of it if I did a bad job explaining that. They'll be all over me.
Oh, fantastic. Well, if you want to learn more about that, I guess that you'll be easy to find. And Jared, we did have somebody asked for your contact information if they want to get in touch and learn about Evalua. So we can either drop that, I think, in the chat. We'll also make sure it's in the post-event email that we'll send out. So you'll be able to get in touch with Jared and his team at iValua, no problem. I assume you guys are open to hearing from folks in the audience there offline.
Yes, absolutely. We'd love to hear from it. That's the best part of these webinars is the follow-up discussions.
Absolutely. All right, so let's hop along into some of the case studies that we talked about. You mentioned the New York City case study. That's definitely on the list, by the way. I love how their story starts in the old garbage collection contracts from the 70s and the organized crime. That's such an interesting part of that story. But the first one that we're going to talk about is a little bit more timely in the sense of the COVID crisis. So imagine it's March 1st of 2020, and you work for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, the largest municipal water and power utility in the country, serving 4 million residents. It's early March. You're getting melt from the mountains and the Cascades, I guess, is the mountain range out there. It's already sort of the rainy spring, and COVID hits. And prior to COVID-19, you were humming along with your procurement solution, accepting bids only by mail or in person. But now suddenly, this becomes impossible. And you have no way to really acquire the support of critical contractors during an emerging crisis in a time when I imagine the water and power utility companies are working pretty hard. So this was the challenge that the LA Department of Water and Power had. How do we quickly stand up something that can allow us to accept bid and proposal information through other than analog ways, mail or in person? So Evalua did something amazing, and Blake, Blake or Jared can talk a little bit about what you guys did, and then we're going to bring it back and talk about how it kind of relates to the broader picture of eProcurement. So quickly, what did you do, and kind of how did you do it for LA?
Yeah, so this really came about is it really just came about as a request from help for the LA Department of Water and Power. Is as you mentioned, they just didn't have the ability to do any of their normal processes. They were all paper-based. They were still relying on a bid drop-off box, and everything sort of ground to a halt for them. So they came to us as asking us questions: hey, is there anything you can do for us? And of course, the answer is yes. Because we have a lot of solutions we talked about, but it was one of these, can you do it quickly, like within a week? So, it's important from us from a social standpoint, and as a company who's in California, just in general, is yes, we took on the challenge to build them a version of our supplier portal, that we could have their suppliers register, and also quickly build them, using our solution, a secure Dropbox where they could actually get the bids in order to do that. So again, we went from, it was about I think just maybe even under just a full week where we just engaged, we got the list of requirements, and we were able to get everything configured that they needed to meet their business processes, stood up, and then also provide the support to their suppliers to get them quickly registered. Again, they come in, they fill out the information, we can get them quickly onboarding, we can bring that information in. So again, they can start collecting the necessary bid information so they can actually get stuff awarded to do the items that we can. I will say it is the fastest implementation that we've ever done, which speaks a lot to the individuals involved, their commitment to our customers, but also the platform. So it was really just a great win for us, and we hope it's the beginning of a partnership that we can take to the next level here, and we're able to deal with each other outside of the world sort of burning down around us, literally and figuratively. With the team out there. So it really was just great. We were able to get the suppliers on quickly, answer their questions, and get them moving.
Terrific. I mean, it's a commendable effort, and I'm sure it helped a lot of people providing critical services out there. So kudos to the ability to kind of step up and do that. Also, we'll now have the opportunity to bring in a couple of our other panelists to the conversation. Jared, take a breath for a minute. You've been carrying this so far. We appreciate it. I am curious, and maybe Jason can speak to this, or Hal. We can hear from both of you. But when you digitize one part of your process, in this case, the acceptance of bids, that can have corollary benefits for the rest of the procurement organization. Jason, any thoughts to sort of how that can kind of unlock the power of eProcurement if you just start with that first entry process, and then we'll hear from Hal.
Sure, absolutely. And I think there are differences on kind of the federal, state, local, and even private sector levels. And here, because if we take the example of the LA Department of Water and Power, the requirements from a data collection standpoint, I don't know the particular case, so don't tell me I'm completely wrong, though I might be, are probably not as similar to the DFAR or the FAR, which I'm much more familiar with on the federal side. So you have more flexibility in your bid collection and process. I look at sourcing as really an opportunity not just to get bids and possibly negotiate, but a chance to get supplier information and bid information. So if we look at this as kind of fuel for everything else we might do down the line, it provides a basis for a supplier information management solution, so we can collect and have current information on suppliers. It provides a means to have better contract data at our hands if we decide we want to implement a contract management solution. And certainly, depending on the need, it can provide a means of tying together what we would call in the private sector the upstream and the downstream in terms of, say, sourcing analytics with the downstream of eProcurement, invoice to pay, AP automation. So we essentially flip, if you will, a sourcing event to a contract, which can then be bought off of, depending on what that is, within a requisitioning system, to use some private sector language there. So it's a great sourcing, and essentially putting a contract in place, getting bids is just a great place to jump off to do other initiatives. If you can start there. I mean, I think even further upstream from that, you can argue that analytics and just basic data on your suppliers in the supply markets is an even more foundational place to start. But if you're going to start with sourcing, it's as good a place as virtually any. Maybe Hal can chime in as well.
Yeah, Hal, I know you served as an executive in public procurement, so you could speak from a practitioner's level expertise on how, for this first area of the intake process, digitizing that can have downstream benefits. What's your perspective on this?
I think what we got confronted with in COVID was a big disruption in the fact that for years we thought to be progressive was to move down the road of just-in-time, and to make just-in-time relevant to possibly almost everything we did. And then all of a sudden with COVID, we're confronted with a environment where it's not just in time, but it's just in case. And that whole issue revolves around being able to get what we needed when we needed it and to manage risk at the same time. And there was all kinds of risk out there, as all of us know. So I think in a nutshell, the digital environment allows us to be agile and to quickly switch and to involve stakeholders. We talked about partnering with suppliers and internal people, and the digital environment, as opposed to the paper environment that we had in the past, allows us to bring people on board to manage risk in a way that was never open to us before, and it was never more important in this COVID environment. So I think it's a huge disruption. Drives a huge change in our thinking, but we now bring more people in, suppliers, collaboration with more internal people, our risk management people, our legal people, the end user, and we can have all those people involved selectively in a managed network in a digital environment where that was never a capability before. And so we don't have the silos, whether they were there on purpose or whether they were there because of a lack of technology. But we have a whole new world open to us, and I think we're just starting to realize and to really make use of the benefits of that as we deal effectively with the COVID crisis and the changes it's driven.
Fantastic. You mentioned two sort of trigger words there for me: agility, the agile process, and then sort of breaking down these silos. I think that's really important to keep in mind, especially from the silo perspective. The more we digitize, the more we go towards e-procurement, the easier it's going to be for procurement organizations and teams within the procurement organization to share that information and make better decisions. On the agility side, that's a great segue to our next case study. And by the way, how about that LA Department of Water and Power building? I don't know if that's entirely theirs or not, but that is one of the more impressive public sector headquarters I've ever seen. But I said agility was going to be the bridge to the next case study, and it is. The next case study that we've got is New York City. So New York City needed to digitize its e-procurement process. They started with a very simple goal. They just wanted an e-procurement solution to reduce some paper inefficiencies. What I really like about this case study, and I'm going to let Jared come back in and share some of the details, but Public Spend Forum did a podcast. We've done some content with New York City on what they've done and how they did it, and their agile process. I'll tell you what, if you're trying to lead an enterprise into the next sort of phase or transform them into an e-procurement or a digital environment, you can take a note from what New York City did. They didn't start with, we're going to do everything all at once. They broke it down. They worked in an iterative fashion over a couple of different phases, and they really understood that going digital isn't just about writing code. Jared, take us from here, and then we'll do a little discussion around this.
Yeah, I love this case study as well, and I've talked about it so many times, and it seems like every time I talk to them some more, it's just some great nuggets. They did a multi-phase approach with us, and they focused a lot of their first part of their transformation on the information, just like Jason mentioned, is getting the suppliers onboarded, getting that information. Some of the statistics that they share with us on this is their before solution is, and we mentioned it, is to get a supplier registered. It took weeks, and I'm not just taking a few weeks. We had the 7 to 8 weeks there. It was actually even longer than that. You add maybe another month on top of it that it would take the suppliers just to fill out the paperwork on these items and to be able to go through on that. And for them to do an RFP or just an RFQ, we were talking, it was taking the better part of a year just to do those type of things. So they really went in with the idea of to do a number of things. Is number one, they wanted to go from paper to an electronic process, and they wanted to be able to leverage that data. They're using the system across 41 different agencies. They have 6,000 procurement staffs that are using this solution. They're doing about 115,000 procurement actions a year. And so across these 41 agencies, they weren't leveraging this data. You might have a supplier doing the same type of registration across all these different agencies, and they might be different on these. So they really went in with the design of they're going to work with the suppliers first, get them onboarded, and to have that information. And Blake, you can keep me honest here, but I'm pretty sure the item that we quoted is to get a supplier registered would take over 12 pounds of paper under the old process. So, you know, and that's not, you know, an exaggeration. That's how much paper that would actually be filled out for a file once to get them through, to be able to do those type of things. And now to get that down to just an electronic process, and to take it down from, you know, 10 to 12 weeks down to 1 week in order to get that done was just it's just a huge, just a huge win for them. But one of the things I love about their case study as well, when I talk about it, is some of the ancillary items. When we look at what they were doing on some of their MWBE spend back in 2015, you know, it was about 8% of their spend that they were tracking. Now in 2020, they're almost up to around 28% of their spend, very close to their goals on these. And there's a number of reasons they did this, a number of, you know, wonderful programs they didn't put in place. But, you know, we like to think procurement digitization is like giving a very skilled carpenter a really nice hammer versus before we were asking them to pound nails with a rock. So, and we've really seen some of the tangible benefits in what they've been able to do in some of these areas. So it's, you know, there's a number of you know, different statistics you could go through on these, cycle time savings, you know, just sharing information. It really is such a great, you know, win case just to talk about in general from a professional standpoint, but, you know, also for the city, just what a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that supplier onboarding process, you know, was something that occurred not just with the office that you all worked with. I believe it was sort of every agency in the state of New York would have to go through a similar vendor onboarding process that just took forever.
Right.
And you know, if you're a supplier today, let's say you're a service provider, even you provide something digital service, and you're not really geographically restricted. In other words, you can service state and local agencies all across the country. You know, what they're facing right now with the vendor onboarding and registration for all these individual portals makes it really challenging. And so this is a nice example of something that New York did, starting with that onboarding process as kind of the low-hanging, obvious piece of fruit. Let's solve this. And it's kind of like a nice appetizer for e-procurement and digitization that makes the entire process a little bit more palatable. And one of the things about that, and another aspect of this case that I like a lot, is that they recognized this. I mean, I don't think this was accidental, this phased approach. One thing they saw clearly was that this wasn't just going to be about adding new technology, adding digital tools. It was going to require a huge cultural shift. And Hal, I'm wondering if you can kind of talk to this a little bit, having seen some of the evolution. You know, how important is culture to an organization's ability to receive and benefit from e-procurement tools?
Yeah.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I think it's very important because I think one of the things that we've always been challenged with in procurement, especially in the public sector, is getting resources. And so the digital environment allows us to make our information and the results and the benefits of it clearly transparent to those in the C-suite. At the same time, it also allows us to selectively make it available to the general public. So I think we're actually in a situation where procurement can shine as never before, because we can accomplish fantastic results as a result of the collaboration the digital environment gives us, and at the same time we can show them on a as needed basis, or they can simply access it at their leisure, the C-suite and the general public. and it allows us to make a statement that we've never been able to make in the whole analytical environment that we suffered from for years.
Thank you, and Jason, and your perspective as well as somebody who sort of helps mentor and consult with companies that are going through these and organizations that are going through these transformations. Anything to add on the cultural aspect of it?
Sure, and even going back to just the New York case study, I like to be grounded in data on things. And as I was listening, I dug out an old spreadsheet we created a while ago for a client just around justifying all the elements of ROI, private sector or public sector, around supplier registration. And there's well over a dozen fields in terms of time to find suppliers, research, diversity compliance. It's a great case study there. Supplier information errors. So not only bringing down the time from those weeks to or months to weeks, but all those other areas. I mean, you can get a massive ROI, but you can also make your stakeholders on the front lines happy as well, whether that is private or public sector. So not to be a presidential or vice presidential debate person here and answer the other question, but or the question I want to answer, but anyone looking to implement, we would call it in our vernacular source to pay, but eProcurement in government is perfectly reasonable to call it as well, because it is called that, system for supplier management. There are so many bases for building a return on investment model to justify it. But in terms of the cultural piece, especially in a crisis situation, where so many of us, whether we're state, local, federal, or private sector, are working remotely most of the time, just the cultural aspect of being able to do things online in terms of researching a supplier who may be in the system, or directing a supplier, if we are a procurement manager, to go online and make updates, is just huge. And being able to make sure, we don't do it with just kind of our back office systems, but truly a front office system, which people can use. The right digital solutions can just make a big difference. If we were to measure the Net Promoter Score of procurement, as more and more organizations are doing, it just makes us so much more successful overall as a champion for more effective spending.
Yeah, well said. I mean, culture, what is it? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, and digital tools are only good if people use them. So lots more on this case study for anyone who's interested in the chat there. We do have a question. We have two questions right now, one specific to the supplier onboarding process. Jared, do you know off the top of your head if there was a self-registration process that was used to onboard New York City suppliers?
Yeah, it's always sort of a mix when we have a strategy for that. You can work with the suppliers that they can come in, they can log into the system and actually complete their information, set up their profile, or we have the ability, if we import suppliers from another system, to actually issue an invitation out to the suppliers via email if we have good contact information, which just gives them a link, and we can have a pre-built shell for them for what the information we have to do that. So, and I don't know the specifics for the mix within New York City. It's something I could follow up on and be able to get you that information. But traditionally when we go in, especially big entities with a lot of these, we use a mix of change management. We do enablement, letting the suppliers know you're going to have to go in and do these through the portal, or sending those type of reminders and making it easier for the suppliers to do that, whatever works for the client. But I can't follow up on the specific strategy we use there.
Great. Thanks, Jared. So New York City is well into their third phase now. They're dropping lead times for these processes, from 8 weeks to 1 in some cases. They've got process and automation rules that are really improving their outcomes. I love the example of, the online proposal submission process. You can't complete that until you give all the required information. So just think of how that can help your evaluation teams in terms of, less paperwork or rework, less modifications or amendments. better proposals and in less time evaluating anything that's non-compliant. So really important stuff. And I think that's a good segue as we start to think about kind of the future of procurement digitization and where we're going with this. I started my procurement career. I did have electronic contract management systems, but we still used a lot of paper. We were still pretty comfortable with that back then. I remember receiving bids, and I had my special pen for signing my first contract when I got my warrant. But you know, it's changing a lot, and I'd like to maybe ask each of our panelists as we conclude this and get to the final questions, if you could just give me one of the trends that you see that's going to take us into the future when it comes to digital procurement. And I'll let anybody start.
I think one of the things that is key is that the digital environment allows us to collaborate as never before. And both the case studies that we looked at today were kind of driven ahead by COVID. And so the COVID united us with a common cause, with all the different stakeholders, whether it's suppliers, whether it's internal customers, whether it's risk managers. And so I think that the collaboration is the key element that the digital environment allows us to use as never before in the future.
Thanks, Hal.
Yeah, I'll actually second that and I think he nailed the answer there. It's going to be the move from more of suppliers being transactional to be partners and collaborative. You know, just from the standpoint as we looked at COVID with the disruption to the supply chain, but also moving forward to drive innovation in new opportunities for us is how do we better collaborate with the suppliers across the board to share ideas and move things. So I think that was a great answer.
Great. Thanks, Jared. Jason, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it down a slightly different track, but I think digital provides us with just an order of magnitude greater flexibility to do new things in procurement. Yes, it can enable us to do things better than in the past, but I think, for example, you know, we don't often think of ourselves as supply chain managers in procurement, you know, managing inventory and safety stock and lead times. That's more, you know, that's more of a different job depending on where you are in public or private sector. But it lets us rethink how we design supply chains, for example. So New York, case in point, you know, tripling diversity spend. That's supply chain redesigned. You know, it's getting different suppliers. If we think about, you know, COVID and, you know, let's say historically, you know, we're working with local suppliers, you know, to clean, you know, different buildings for us on a daily basis. But what if we can tap in a new supplier who might be local, who might not, you know, who has, and I'm making this up, some kind of new ionizing, you know, device or whatever it is that kills viruses and bacteria on the spot, and it's a complement. But historically, it would take us 10 weeks to qualify them. But now we can identify them, you know, within our search, within our eProcurement tool quickly. So the notion of flexibility and what digital enables us to do, I just think can make us so much more flexible for what we may or may not anticipate. And it can just make us do our jobs better. And again, you know, ultimately, I think a lot of you know, the goal of public procurement is value for taxpayers, right? And value is not just savings, value is other things too. But if we can provide additional value to government in different ways and taxpayers beyond our charter. So for example, if we could quantify the case reduction, you know, of COVID transmission for somebody stepping foot on a public property because of a new, not just a new cleaning protocol, but a new device that, you know, dramatically, and I will use a non-medical term here, zaps the virus, right? You know, that is a value add which procurement couldn't have done previously because of digital. So just one example, but, you know, think about this as a foundation for additional things which you couldn't even conceive of until you had the system to be able to do. So not from fighting fires, but to truly, you know, doing amazing things.
Definitely agree with that. Yeah, it's amazing how, you know, crisis can sometimes be a terrific forcing function in a lot of ways. And if that's one of the good things that comes out of this, then, you know, we can at least appreciate that. Final questions here. So I'm not actually sure I know the answer to this, but I'll put it out there in case anybody does. But Judy is asking if anybody's familiar with the CARES Act funding for public agencies. And it's, I guess the CARES Act has a line item in there for public agencies to invest in procurement software. I assume if that's true, that Evalua would be, you know, happy to receive those types of funds if they were given the opportunity. But Jared, Jason, Hal, any specific answer there?
I would need to read. I would need to read the act. I missed that if it's in there.
Yeah, I think I did as well. Like, why don't we take that, and we find anything there, Judy, we'll make sure to include that in the post-event email if we do find clarification there. So one other question is just, I guess, Sean makes the point that syndicated sourcing was really important for New York City for procuring PPE. Do we see technology being able to enable cross-entity collaboration and maybe facilitate syndicated sourcing? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually had the same thought. I actually agree, Sean, with where you're going on that. I think when you just look at some of the consortium contracts we already have available, to make those available across, I do think we can enable those type of things. And it was actually some of the questions we had in some of our recent user group that we were trying to work through. We sort of ran out of time, didn't get all those, but yeah, that's what I'd sort of like to see next, within the rules that you can do those type of things. How could we collaborate? You're seeing that sort of happen offline now, but why not? Why shouldn't we be able to enable that with the technology?
Well, thank you so much. We are at the top of the hour, and that's all the time we have for today. But please keep the questions coming. Like I said, we'll make sure the contact information for Jared is available to anyone who wants to continue the conversation. Thank you to our panel, Jared, Jason, and Hal. Appreciate your time today. Thank you to everyone in the audience for your participation and engagement. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. All right. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Cheers.